This episode is sponsored by JDAQA Software Testing, your scalable solution for manual, automated, security, and performance testing. Check us out at jdaqa.com. And with that, let's get on with the show.
This is The First Customer, hosted by Jay Agnew.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the First Customer Podcast. Today, I am lucky enough to be joined by Bill Neer. He's the founder and CEO of Helios, helping athletes and teams get better faster. I don't chase people around on this podcast, but Bill, I chased you around mainly because we're a customer. I've got 3 kids in hockey. Hello to Blake, Harper, and Jack, all 3 hockey kids. We love Helios very much. Bill, how are you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Thank you for being a customer and for this opportunity to get on here.
Yeah, man. My wife, as she does, is the head of the hockey organization here in the household. She found Helios and was like, "This is great. Like, I love this thing, and our son loves it." And I have one interesting question that I thought about as I was preparing for this show, which
Yeah, fire away.
I do very little preparation, but here we go. Now, I was wondering about tech fatigue, like new tech fatigue, right? You're like, everybody's like, "Oh my God, I got this cool thing." We all do it, right? We get a new phone, we get a new whatever. We're like, "Oh, this is the coolest fucking thing ever." And then 2 weeks later, it's sitting in a drawer somewhere. And, I guess we would call that churn or something in the product world. Do you guys worry about that? Do you combat that? Is it something that, you kind of have noticed that it's like a big spike at the beginning and then usage kind of tails off? How do you guys keep people engaged in a hardware, software kind of thing where they have to remember to charge something, they have to do some things to use the product? How do you guys make sure the life of the product is as long as you would like it to be?
Yeah, no, I think it's like an existentially important topic. We talk about it probably every day. And I think it gets back to things that we believe in sort of first principles about wearables. And I've been wearing wearables for many years, and I've always believed that a data only wearable that doesn't provide recurring value will stop being charged, stop being used. If it's a subscription, people will stop paying. So for us, it's all about creating recurring value. And I think, we do an okay job of that today. I think we're always our biggest critics on what we need to keep doing to drive value around that. A big thing for us is our ability to interface with video. And so by providing time savings around shift video, it's one way we sort of think that we design ourselves in to add value is for as long as you're taking hockey games or practices and you don't want to watch the whole thing and you'd like to just see the moments when your son or daughter was out there, if you need that, we provide that value. And so that's one thing we think that is part of our kind of lifetime value driving stickiness. On the data side, we're doing a lot of work right now to just integrate more AI coaching function and really bringing more to the surface that's sort of player development plans and player development recommendations for the player. And our whole thought there is if that's really your secret weapon on giving you advice based on your data, the data in the cloud, knowledge about hockey player development, if we can do that well plus the video thing, we think we're there for the long run, which is for as long as you're playing hockey, you're going to want this sort of unfair advantage to give you this leg up.
I love that.
We talk about it every day. It's super important.
No, I love that. And I love that you guys are very tuned in, because the feedback loop and always talk about, the customer cycle and people always, want to get feedback. But you mentioned some things on our pre-show that I found interesting because those are the exact problems that we had as users. It was oh, our kids in the locker room and we have to have the phone, but we don't want, and there was, so you guys are really dialed into how your customers use the product. Tell me a little bit about just what the infrastructure is around that to collect that data, to be aware, and then to actually apply it to the product, not in a knee-jerk way, but in a way that you get enough of the feedback that you actually make changes to the platform.
Yeah, I think one of the cool things about building a cloud connected device through the app experience that we've built is that we get a lot of information. So if a user has a device crash in the field, we get a report. And so we honestly get so much information that we can't necessarily be sitting there sifting through all of it. But if a customer comes to us and they have a question or if they've had an issue, what's nice is we can sort of go through the CSI kind of crime scene data and just fully resurrect well, it looks like you started this session at this time and this happened at this time. And it's given us a lot of resolution on understanding exactly what our users are doing in the field. Like one of the big assumptions going into the market was that the player would be doing like the majority of the work with
Mm-hmm.
Helios. And then I think what we found was like for the 9 to 14, 15-year-old age group, the parent was actually maybe more involved in like using the app than even the
Yes.
player was. And things the parent would do in the rink were just different than like initial assumptions that we were making. And so like having all of this like back end reporting has like really allowed us to understand that use case better, both for just like normal improvement, but also like if there's an issue, it gives us like really good clarity and allows us to kind of resurrect. One of the things I found early on was we were building trust with the customer. And even if we weren't hitting like a feature on like the right way yet, just by being able to show them that we're dialed in, like we could like repeat back to them, like your session started at 7:03 p.m. Here's what we can see happen at 7:42. This happened. Just the fact that we could show them a, like a log of like, we understand what's happening here and here's how we're improving it, it like went really far because they weren't off on like some island, just having like a standalone experience. And so that level of connectivity has really been our ally in terms of growing the product from the beginning.
I can echo that sentiment. I'm a huge Peloton guy, and I had to call their customer support about something really stupid. It was like early. I was like, I had a streak of 100 things going on. Like, what, why did my thing? And they're like, they could tell. And just to your point, they were like, we saw you started this thing at this time. It didn't. It wasn't the. And I just was like, oh, I like they are looking at data and giving me an answer, not just kind of like reading from some scripts and being like, we've seen this before. Sorry, like we'll let you know later if we can help you. Like I love the fact that you're using data kind of like live customer service, and that gives that people that feeling of like, oh, they are actually looking at stuff that I'm using, so this is pretty beneficial. So I love that. But let me back up. I jumped ahead because I'm so excited. Where did you grow up, and did that have any impact on you being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I grew up in central New Hampshire, pretty like small town life. My family had a horse farm, one of four kids, went to a really small public high school. Didn't we actually like shared a hockey team with a town next door. So I was mostly playing like travel team hockey, although my high school got a team my senior year. I had other kind of entrepreneurial kind of like traits in my family. My grandfather was very entrepreneurial. And for me, there was always sort of just like that itch to kind of like invent, create, build things. I was probably doing better in school than hockey for pretty much like my entire life. And so I got to 18, I got into MIT, and that took me down a path to study engineering. But I was also really lucky to get to play hockey while I was there. And that opened up just like a whole new world for me in terms of like, being able to be entrepreneurial and build things.
How was MIT? I mean, as somebody who went to a ridiculously different college, I went to Full Sail down in Florida, which was specialized for like video game stuff. So it was definitely different. And then you have your kind of normal ish colleges. And then you hear of the MITs of the world, right? You just assume it's just a bunch of guys with pocket protectors, which I don't even know if they wear those anymore, and calculators and just like big rim glasses and stuff. What was the actual vibe going there? Did it feel like a normal college? Where you like, did you know you were in some place with a bunch of super smart people? Like, what was the vibe there in MIT?
Yeah, I think it was a super humbling experience. Like it was extremely hard, particularly the 4 years of undergrad. I found grad school to almost be like enjoyable relative to undergrad, and that you had more time to free think and build stuff and work on what you like wanted to work on. Whereas the undergraduate 4 years felt like every minute of every day, including the weekends, was super clocked against something that was like hard to actually even accomplish. So it was extremely hard. It was humbling because there's all these people who are better at everything except for like maybe one thing that you're good at. And you just get like really brought back down to earth freshman year, realizing that because you have a lot of people who did really, really well at their high schools and now they're all together. And it's like, oh, wow, I can't actually be good at everything anymore, which is humbling. And yeah, but it was like transformational. I have a hard time even like relating to the person that went into that 4 year college process initially before I did the 2 years of grad school as well. So it kind of changed my life forever, gave me like a toolbox and a skill set. And it also just beat bad habits out of me. So I used to be the occasional procrastinator and find ways to like burn time. And what you learn there is like that just stacks up on itself and it really comes back to bite you. So you quickly learn to have much better habits in order just to survive and get through that time there.
MIT has a hockey team?
We've got a hockey team. There's
How did I
actually
not know that? What's it called? What's the team name?
so the we're the engineers, but the actual like mascot is a beaver, like a
Okay.
nocturnal a builder, right? As like an
Okay.
engineer. And so all the
Okay.
uniforms have this like angry beaver kind of on the front of them.
The Engineers. What a hilariously perfect name for MI. That is just like that's fantastic. My daughter and I had a lot of fun the other day. I'm a big fan. Actually, I love minor league baseball team logos and hats and stuff, and we did like a
Nice.
pass through of all the minor league hockey teams, and I was like, "Oh my god, there's so many!" Like, there's this Savannah Ghost Pirates, and just like these wide. Like, I'm so excited to like start to accumulate a collection of minor league just for the names and the logos and the mascots. So that's why I love the MIT being the engineers. Let's get back to Helios. You raised your seed round recently, but walk me back through like kind of just the genesis of the product. I mean, I know you have some patents out there, which some seemed completely unrelated to hockey or sports in general, but then I looked like there was one maybe that kind of was a little bit related to this. Where did the idea come from and how did you start to execute on it?
Yeah, so I mean, I was a lifelong hockey player, spent these 6 years studying electrical engineering, computer science at MIT, played hockey for five, kind of look back at my own player development experience and really felt like I had sort of developed up until about 16 years old in a bit of what I call a vacuum, and that like I didn't have somebody really giving me a crystal clear sense of like where I was at in hockey and what my opportunities were or were not going to be at like a college level. That's changed a lot today in terms of just like the access to seeing other players through social media, but like those things didn't exist when I was growing up. And I always imagined that like there would be a technology for player development that would give you more insight and sort of be your coach and help you out. So I spent about a decade working close to kind of like motion sensors and in electrical engineering. I spent 5 years for working for an automotive active suspension startup. And what I saw happening was that these like motion sensors that we all have in our watches and our phones today, accelerometers, gyroscopes, IMUs, they were integrating this like AI block, and that AI block would allow you to build a wearable that could detect the motion of an athlete. And the reason why I think nobody had gone out and built a product that like your three kids could use before this was everybody was thinking about position tracking. And
Mm,
position tracking means you've got to like install something in the ceiling of the hockey rink because GPS doesn't work when you go indoors. And if you look at like the cost structure of doing that, and like who's actually going to pay to put something in a hockey rink, there's nobody who's going to pay to put
mhm,
infrastructure in hockey rinks. And so that was like dead on arrival for like creating a business around that. And so when I saw this sort of like mega trend coming to like how these chips were working and I was designing with them, all of a sudden a light bulb turned on and it was like, wow, you could really build like a zero infrastructure platform, Helios, that would track performance with no infrastructure just based on seeing the motion of the athlete, in this case, a hockey player taking skating strides. And that was sort of the whole genesis of the company. And it was fortunate that I had, made some good connections when I was at MIT on the hockey team with like Ron Francis, who was the GM of the Hurricanes at the time and now the president of the Seattle Kraken, to kind of loop him in. He became the first backer of the company and we got
mm.
started in 2018.
And along those lines, partnerships, I see them on your announcements. We're huge proponents of kind of ecosystem led growth, is what we kind of live by in the agency world. You mentioned having a connection to somebody, which obviously is either going to continue to pay off or will pay off, being having access to somebody in an NHL organization. Talk to me about partnerships in general. Like, how do you guys view them? I mean, there's so many options when you're like a wearable and you have all these leagues and people and players and schools and NHL. How do you pick which ones to focus on, and then how are you trying to engage with these companies and or organizations in a partnership kind of collaborative environment so that you guys can move units but also actually provide real value to these organizations you're working with?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, on the definition of customer front and kind of, I guess, viewing partnerships maybe with like teams that we end up selling to, we've definitely, especially I've recently been forced to start to like really get tighter on like what our ideal customer profile is. I mean, today we have everything from like 10U individuals and hockey teams using Helios to the US women's national team as a 3-year customer. we were at the Seattle Kraken dev camp with all their prospects, and it's a pretty like broad set of stakeholders and users that you're like partnering with, selling to in that sense. And they want very different things at the two extremes of like an NHL franchise and like a 10U parent. And I think for us, really coming to terms with that, like as a small company, even as we're growing, we have to be laser focused because we want to be really good at like one segment to allow us to unlock other segments in the future. And so naturally, like the volume for what we do is down market. It's the 10 to 16-year-old and their parent. And I think that's really where like we have the biggest representation today and the biggest focus today. And so that can be an individual or it can be a team. That's the customer side. On more of the classic kind of traditional partnerships for like the product, I think for us it's, it's data integrations and video integrations that have been the focus. On the
Mm-hmm.
video front, we have this pretty magical like feature that I think is really like amazing when it is living up to like its full potential, which is that the wearable detects periods of activity. So in a hockey game, it's shifts, or in practice, it's drill runs. And instead of watching like full length video, we extract just those moments when you had a shift or when you had a drill run, saving a ton of time. The comparable to doing this today is literally humans doing this overseas. So what we try to do is like partner with video providers, live streamers, on-demand video providers, to basically integrate the camera feed directly with the Helios profile so that ultimately like the user takes zero action to then look down at their phone and see like they have those shifts right after the hockey game. And I think that's an area where like partnership unlocks product and unlocks customer experience to
Mm-hmm.
create like the best version of something that we've been working on and envisioning here.
And that was I was talking to my son about this podcast, and his friends were there, and one of them didn't know who Helios was. That was how I described it, right? I was like, it's a tracker for when you're playing hockey, and that integration is probably one of the cooler things about the platform to me. Just as the dad who like is doing exactly what you said, sifting through three 20-minute shifts or 20-minute periods, like find my son like when he's on the ice, and like just having that quick ability is such a really sexy kind of cool feature to people who are in the space having to deal with it all the time being a parent. Is there any like have you guys learned anything about how to build new features or what features to pay attention to based on kind of a split demographic, right? So you're selling to parents because they have the money, obviously, to the 10U kind of crowd, but you want the kids as they get older and like care more about their progression to be the users of the data to some degree, so they're like buying into it and they're actually improving, and like the system works and all, it's kind of a self-fulfilling kind of loop there. How do you continue to like iterate on the product and make sure you're focusing on the right person, if that makes sense?
Yeah, no, it definitely makes sense because there's this handoff that happens probably like, I don't know if you have a kind of corroborating opinion of this, but like we view it as like 14 to 16-year-olds start to take more autonomy and like their own development. They're making more of their own hockey decisions, sort of maybe pushing the parent out a little bit, or maybe just taking pride in like getting to take those, like make the decisions. And at that point, like by 16, it's kind of like, you're probably as at a user level needing to have the 16 to 18 plus year old player really buying into like, I'm using Helios for this. And I think a big thing that we've realized there that's common to the parent and then the individual player user is that the data just has to take you pretty far towards like a level of recommendation or insight. Maybe early on with a tech forward data centric parent that like works in kind of a technology industry, you can get by presenting things that are a little bit more technical and they're helping kind of buffer the data down to the kid. But as
Hmm.
soon as you get to just the kid using it at 16 to 18 years old, it needs to be really simple. And I actually think this is an area where we're investing a lot of cycles right now because we sort of view like our app as presenting information at like a pretty common hierarchy, and we're trying to move towards like a more streamlined kind of like top level score hierarchy where if you want to drill down into more detailed metrics you can. That's what we present today as like the
Hmm.
numbers, but we think it's like maybe a little too tech forward, a little too data centric, right? Especially in that handoff to that player. Other things that I think like just the individual player cares about, they care about who else is on Helios. They like to be able to look laterally and both see peers that they know, those are friends, but they also like to see like the kids who are the known like megas
Hmm.
here that everyone's talking about. And so I think having really good top end players that everybody talks about, plus like your son or daughter's friends on Helios, makes those like comparables, plus just the social interactions about our product richer. And so doing things to continue to drive like feature development that enhances those is important, especially when the parent moves out of the picture.
Mhm. Yeah. No, and that was gonna kinda be my next question was, what are the things that drive the kids to use it more? But I think you're dead on. I mean, that like, the leaderboard kinda stuff and, like and are you guys, like, actively scouting any of these really good players to be even in youth hockey, like, their parents to be on how are you getting better kids, right? Because I mean, if we're all being honest, like, majority of our kids are not gonna be in the NHL one day, but, like, how do you know who the mega kids are or whoever like are you talking to orgs? Are you focused on that at all? Is it important to you guys? Like what are you doing there?
Yeah, we are. I mean, we're picking up some of them just through like customers. So, for example, like last season, we had Gavin McKenna wearing Helios at Medicine Hat Tigers. So, like, there's like probably one of the most electric players you're hearing about today in hockey playing at Penn State, who had it on last season when he was playing in the Canadian Hockey League. So, we're naturally like picking up like references on some really good players just by virtue of some of like our team customers.
Hmm,
In more of a direct relationship sense, one of the benefits is like, we did these partnerships with Carolyn Harvey and Matthew Nyes and those types of athletes when you work with like an elite college or an elite like professional NHL or PWHL player, you're typically working with their agent. And so you have these
hmm,
hockey agents. And what's really kind of fascinating for the folks that don't know the hockey world is like agency like pipeline of future kind of representation literally goes down to like 14-year olds, right? Like they're forming a relationship with 14-year olds who might play in the NHL someday and identifying like who is going to be the best and who do we want to be like kind of hitching the wagon with to have a relationship so that if they become an NHL player, like we're their agent down the road. And that's like something that I've learned that's kind of wild. And so through those relationships, I think we can get to a breadth of like really top end players from that like youth level all the way up to like the Matthew Nyes of the world. And I think we're definitely leaning into like some of those agency relationships where we're actually able to provide some new value for the agency to have their clients like using Helios. And that's getting us to a certain caliber of just like top end players, even in those younger birth years.
I was gonna ask, how do Helios users get the most out of it? And is the answer just to wear it? Is that
Yeah,
what
I
they
think
need to
it
do?
depends on the age group. I mean, wearing it definitely is the first step. Users are like literally starting using Helios exclusively for that video feature that I mentioned a few
Mhm.
minutes ago. And so, like, yeah, you wear it, you put your game video in, you start watching your shifts, you save a bunch of time. Some people then take those shifts and they pass them off to a coach that like provides a service where they review game film and they
Mm,
coach your son or daughter to how they played in that game. Most of those coaches are not willing to take a 2.5 hour full game video and be like the video editor. And so
right.
what we're finding is there's a lot of synergy in handing them the pre-cut shifts from Helios as part of that workflow. Some of the other things we do around like driving kind of like rankings by birth year and showing you your progress over time, the intention there is to allow you to see strengths and weaknesses and also where you're actually getting better and to use that within your own player development ecosystem. So it's today maybe not fully turnkey, and that like as a parent, you still might take your son or daughter to a skill development coach and you might need to like actually make Helios a part of that conversation with them to say like this is the data we're getting from this product. It's sort of emphasizing that like my player has a really high foot speed but it's not that productive, they don't have a lot of explosiveness in their stride, like can you work with them on that, right? Part of where we're going is providing more sort of like full turnkey recommendation and insight to that
Mm,
parent and to that player. They'll still probably take that over to their trusted development partner, but we want them to feel more like fully informed and empowered through the information that we can give them in like a more recommendation sort of way from this like AI coaching angle.
I love that. We're getting to the end here, but I am curious. I mean, as somebody who's smart as shit and has a ton of just great experience along the way. You're busy, you're building this company, you're raising money, you're doing product market feedback. So you're just all what do you do as a founder, as a CEO, as a founder and CEO who loves my business very much. I love the everything about business. It just excites me. What do you do to get out of that and like get into another headspace and just come down and relax? Is it going and playing hockey? I hope the answer is maybe you have another hobby or something else other than just hockey. What do you do as a successful founder in your downtime?
Yeah, hockey actually still is like a major outlet for me. I think
Okay.
I always wondered if building a business in hockey would make it so that like going and playing hockey no longer would make it an outlet, but it still very much so is. So I try to get on the ice at least once a week just because the level of exercise and exertion that you don't realize you're doing because you're just consumed with the act of playing hockey is still, in my opinion, like the best exercise you can do versus standing on a treadmill and like watching the clock count up to 20 minutes and wondering like how it's only at 10. But beyond that, like completely separate from hockey, I'm a father of two and a husband, and that actually does give me just like a ton of joy, a ton of gratitude. So I really enjoy spending time with my family. My daughter's 4, my son is 1. My wife is also an entrepreneur. So we live kind of a fun life, both building businesses. But, living in New Hampshire, we spend a lot of time at the lake. We live really close to the ocean, like to be at the ocean whenever possible, and also just like hiking in the mountains. So those are, if you take all of that plus 2 entrepreneurs in a household, we find a way to fill time pretty easily.
Do your kids have any chance to play another sport or is it going to be hockey?
No, I'm actually like coming at this like I want you to love hockey, but I want you to like find it in the way that I
Mhm.
found it. Neither of my parents played hockey. I was the first person in my family, and that might have actually ultimately capped like what my potential trajectory in hockey was going to be just from like the age when I first started playing serious and like how long it took for me to really ramp into like a competitive like travel schedule. I'll be like a little bit more of a leg up on that for my kids because I played competitively, but I think I want them to find it. I'll just be happy if they like to stay active and they find something that keeps them really excited. Hopefully they'll always like want to watch hockey with me. But
There you go. That's a good answer. I
there's
like
a
that
gentle
answer.
nudge. We're skating whenever we can.
I bet you are. I bet, yeah. We have the 13, the 9, and the 8 that are in hockey, but we also have the 3 and the 1-year-old behind them. I'm hoping for something that I can be outdoors for a little bit. I like to be outdoors. I always tell my kids, I almost hate every part about hockey except for the 60 minutes that they're on the ice. Every other than that, like I don't want to be in the rink. I don't want to be in the locker room. I just want to watch them play hockey and I want to get back outside. Like that's where I like to be is outside. So I'm hoping for maybe a softball or a soccer or just something to get me outside, in the nice days during the fall.
Awesome.
But I do love hockey and I love watching my kids play. So well, one last question, non-hockey related, non-business related. I'm gonna give you this caveat because I keep getting this answer and I don't like this answer. It cannot be what you're currently doing today. This is more of a thought provoking question. If you could do anything on earth and you knew you wouldn't fail, what would it be?
Be a professional hockey player.
There it is. See, I know. I mean, it's a layup or not a
I mean,
layup.
if I could get paid to play hocky, I think that
Well,
was and always
in this
remains the
scenario,
childhood dream. I think the window probably closed, but
now you're doing this. You're doing the next best thing. You're gonna know all the guys. You're gonna be, you're in it, right? That's all that matters. But in this scenario, you can't fail. So you're a hockey player. Congratulations, you finally made it, Bill. You're awesome, dude. One of the most put together entrepreneurs I've talked to. I love the way you think about stuff. I love how analytical you are, but also kind of business forward, and also just with the feedback and the product. Everything's impressive. Keep up the incredible work. I love it. My kids love it. If people want to reach out to you directly to talk about something that you said today, how would they do that?
yeah, I mean, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if it's like in a professional capacity. I'm not sure if that would be like the best for this audience, or you can reach out through any of our like Helios channels and a message that's like directed to me will get forwarded to me for sure.
All right, man. Well, Bill, you're awesome. Thanks for all you do. We'll be following along with the story and hopefully have you on again someday and have a good rest of your week. All right.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jay, and thanks for using the product.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate you.